Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Aslina Bulmer, Director of International at the Royal Institute of British Architects, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the first topic of the 2021 Global Architecture Exchanges Series, Climate Change, Sustainability. How do architects respond to the climate emergency? After the success of last year's series, we decided to renew the initiative and work again in partnership with the American Institute of Architects, the Australian Institute of Architects, the Architectural Society of China, the Royal Institute of Dutch Architects, the Council of Architecture and Urbanism in Brazil, the Japan Institute of Architects, the Korean Institute of Architects, the New Zealand Institute of Architects, and the Royal Institute of Architects of Ireland. With this in mind, I am delighted to be the host of this collaboration with our sister institutes, where we have the pleasure to have a great lineup of international speakers from 5 different countries in Europe, Asia, and Australasia. It is fantastic that once again we have an audience from many different countries from across the world. For the last 16 months, we have learned of new ways to connect with each other. Sometimes we manage it quite easily, but like this morning with a couple of glitches. In a way, it is great to be able to reach so many of you wherever you are in the world. Speaking of adaptation, in this first topic, we will be exploring the practical steps and measures architects need to consider when designing with climate action in mind, looking at how the challenges are tackled across the globe. Today, we have an excellent lineup of speakers from Europe, Asia, and Australasia. They are experts in the field. Many have received awards for their projects. They will talk about their experiences and the challenges they face in their part of the world when designing with climate change in mind. May I take this opportunity to thank all of our speakers, whom I will introduce individually as we go through the main presentations. Jianzhou, Beijing Institute of Architecture Design China, Kwanju Park, TAD Corporation and TAA Architects, Republic of Korea, Sarah O'Dwyer, Chair of the RIAI Sustainability Task Force Ireland, Yuji Iwasaki, Nikon Seikei Japan, Amy Holt, PLP Architecture UK, Jeremy Smith, Irving Smith Architecture New Zealand, Jeremy Smith, Irving Smith Architects New Zealand, and Manu Rubens, Sepazet Projects Netherlands. Thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today for this event. It is very much appreciated. We will also schedule to have Jeremy McLeod from Australia this morning, but unfortunately he's unable to join us due to power outage in Australia. Before we move to the sharing session, there are a couple of housekeeping points for our audience. As we are using Teams, we cannot see or hear our audience, but please do use the Q&A box to communicate with us. There will also be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, and we really want to encourage you to send your questions via the Q&A function. We will get to as many questions as possible. However, if yours was not answered, a record of it will be kept and you will be contacted with an answer wherever possible. During Q&A, it will also not be possible to have all speakers appearing on screen at the same time, but we will be spotlighting speakers who are answering the questions. I will be back at the end as well to be reading the questions out to our speakers. So audience, wherever possible, do tell us if a question is for a specific speaker too. For any further queries, please do not hesitate to use the Q&A function or to contact the team at ribinternational@rib.org is also on your screen currently. Well, I'm now delighted to open the sharing session. For each of our speakers has around about 6 minutes to share their thoughts. Our first speaker is Jiao Jian, Deputy Chief Architect, Beijing Institute of Architecture Design, and Director, Universal Design Research Center, and Executive Vice Director of Beijing Engineering Research Center of Building Energy Efficiency and Urban Ecology. Jian received her master's degree of architect from the Architectural Department of Tianjin University. She is a senior engineer and a national first-class registered architect. She mainly focuses on the directions of sustainable cities and buildings, including eco-city, green buildings, accessibility design, and has completed a number of design and research projects, published a number of articles and papers, won multiple designs and research awards at national and provincial level. Jan, over to you.
Thanks, Azlina. Hello, everyone. Today, my topic is the main issues of green building under the carbon neutral goal. Architecture reflects the change of the relationships between human and nature. Green building appeared in the process of recent change, and green is one of the quadrants of architecture. The theoretical background of green building is the sustainable development. I summarize it in three aspects. The first is value, and the second is ethics, and the third is life and production mode. And the goal of green building has always been to make a balance. Green building design has been as technical design, but the green building defined by the evaluation brings some problems. The first is overlook the interaction between the urban space and infrastructure. And the second is overlook the relationship with lifestyle and the sustainable goal. And the third is haven't had enough impact on the theory. The theoretical background of green building has improved. For value, emphasize the ecosystem, and for ethics, emphasize harmony with nature. About life and production, emphasize self-examining and change the modern ways. I think there are four important issues. The first is green design strategy. The second is closer to nature. The third is creative green design. And fourth is change of architecture idea. Here I'll talk about this. First, we should use the strategies that don't increase the burden on environment. Space successfully support the efficient life within it. Second, we should design buildings that are closer to nature. This is the dining hall of the project mentioned above, welcoming plants, wind, and sunlight into the social space. Third, we should not only put green technologies in the building, but also design creative green buildings. Next, I'd like to introduce the works of two architecture studios, namely Renjun Architecture Studio and Soup Atelier. The works of these two studios are green buildings that are rooted in the local, focus on construction, create places, and respond to landscape and climate. And EAE 10 Studio is within the large design company where I work. He is good at handling large projects and achieving a possible balance between good performance and environmental friendliness. Finally, we should promote a change of architecture idea, more faith to ecological civilization, eliminate the mark of architect, and build for green lifestyle. And EAE 10 Studio treats architecture in natural environment in a different way with it does in the city. This is one of the projects, and the renovation of old buildings is also an important issue for now and the future. These are the renovation projects that I have designed. In a word, based on the existing achievements, how to make green building become the mainstream of design is a matter that needs to be deeply considered. And we should recognize that it needs system collaboration and dynamic adjustment, need a strategic perspective and improvement of ideas and methods. Finally, the highest level of green building is to provide practical dwelling. That's my speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. That was really interesting. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. We're now going to move to the Republic of Korea with our next speaker, Kwon-Ju Park, founder of TAD Corporation and executive director of TA Architects. Kwon-Ju Park graduated from Jeongang University and received his AA Diploma of Architecture from AA School of Architecture, of course. He's a founder of TAD Corporation and also the executive director of TA Architects. As an architect, he presented his work internationally in the field of sustainable architecture. His presentation will look at disaster response shelter in the Philippines and the Marriott Fairfield Busan in the Republic of Korea. Over to you, Kwon-Ju.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. My name is Kwon-Ju Park. And I'll present a project about making disaster response shelter in Philippines. This project is sponsored by Korean Buddhism Joge Order and Community Chest of Korea. Two architecture firms co-worked for this project, Urban Intensity Architect and TA Architect, that's us. The content of the presentation consists of 5 chapters as shown, and I'll start with Typhoon Haiyan. December 2013, Philippines has been struck by a super typhoon Haiyan, locally known as Yolanda. 6,000 people were dead and 1,800 people were injured. Around 4,300,000 people lost their home. The government of Philippines declared a state of national emergency. Super typhoon is designated when its wind speed reaches 234 km per hour. In general, typhoon born upon a condition of warm ocean, as its temperature rises due to the global warming. There are more chances to experience super typhoon annually. Haiyan left a trail of destruction. Tanawan is one of the cities at the center of the pathway and most severely damaged. Even though we visited the site after a month, there were many corpses on the street. We could learn from the people who survived the catastrophe that they were hit by wind first, then debris and water. So we changed to make a shelter that people can protect themselves during the disaster. The initial plan was supplying toolkit for recovery. Yet we could see people selling donated goods at the street market. The local government were not able to recover public facilities while the individual were fixing their home. So we convinced the mayor to build a facility which can help people both during the emergency and ordinary life. Considering the evacuation protocol from the seashore, the site should be located in certain distance and accessible from the whole area. We secured a plot next to one of the main roads and started with geometry that can cope with lateral forces. At the same time, we had to mind the occupiable size of the community. Through the engineering, we could get a structure resist 300 km/h wind speed. The triangle module was designed to resist forces from all directions, standing on a concrete foundation. The detail had to be bear a function such as door and window. Also, it needed to be developed into a deployable structure. For everyday life, the building can be utilized as a local community council, class, or accommodation. Most of the people lost their family members, so that they were tend to involve the local community, which will be converted to emergency council in the future. And when a building encounters a super typhoon, it's impossible to stand still without any damage. We set up a strategy with gradual collapse. Although the primary structure is capable of enduring maximum speed, the subsidiary components has to be flew away to be prepared for the flood. The repetitive design was easy to manufacture. Joint was relatively complicated because of the assemblage. We narrowed down the number of joint type appropriate for bare hand bolting, include the bolt of the foundation. Due to the administration of funding, the structure has to be manufactured in domestic factory. It's been temporarily assembled, painted, and packed to be shipped, as you can see. Every structure component was disassembled into a cargo size. The transportation system of Philippines was overloaded by local global relief supplies. Our team organized a schedule with the local architect to earn some time to make foundation. Yet, the weather didn't allow them to do the pre-work. As soon as we arrived, the concrete foundation was done at the same time with water draining. We could spend the funding as a wage for the local people. One of the main purposes of this project is helping the survivors with work and educate them to be prepared for the future. So there were minimum local subcontractors, and rest of the workers were villagers. They assembled the entire structure with spanner with help of just 2 cranes. As a subsidiary structure, the cladding was made with light timber. Only carpenters could use electricity because it was unstable. The cladding was not interlocked with each other in case of breaking away during the typhoon. The polycarbonate panels were used for the transparency, and the tile was substituted by nipa, which is local material. Likewise, we had to treat the material as potential debris. Also, the component had to be as small as possible or could be shattered. It was a part of grand scheme of us making a cluster of shelter along the coast and act as a single network, not only saving lives during the disaster, but also becoming individual node for disaster control. The average temperature of sea rises 1 degree for the last 100 years, and it causes 7 to 10% rise of humidity. In 80 years in the future, there are high possibility of 20% increase of typhoon size. We all have to be prepared, and that's it.
Thank you, Kwanju. That was very fascinating, and it just really reminds us, thank you for reminding us the true devastation, what natural disaster can be, and why sustainability and climate change, it has got to be and is the main challenge for humanity, and architecture can be part of that solution. Thank you so much for that. We are now going to come back to Europe for our next speaker, who is from Ireland, Sarah O'Dwyer, architect, lecturer and program leader of the Distance Learning Environmental Design of Buildings, MSc in Cardiff University. Sarah is currently the chair of the RAIA Sustainability Task Force and is a member of the ARB Engagement Panel. Sarah splits her work life between practice and academia, teaching and researching in sustainable design theory and practice. And in her practice work at KH Architects and the interdisciplinary practice Place Plus U, she has worked on public housing, town master planning, cluster housing guidelines and age-friendly neighbourhood schemes. Sarah's practice work involves engaging in multi-strand public engagement processes to embed projects in their context. She's currently working with TU Dublin on an Erasmus Plus funded project, Arc for Change, with 4 partner European universities, exploring ways to co-create an architectural climate emergency curriculum. Her current PhD research also explores methods for integrating sustainable design theory into architectural education. Handing over to you, Sarah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I'm, I suppose, coming here with the hat on of being the chair of the Sustainability Task Force, and I'm going to briefly talk through a recent guidance document that the RAIA has published for its architecture members, but indeed for the wider public or for other construction professionals, called the Sustainable Design Pathways. So this document, I suppose, was prepared after we looked at the overall RAIA sustainability policy in 2019. So there was, I suppose there was actually a bit of collaboration with the Australian Institute there, because we basically took one of their documents and worked it up for the Irish context, because it was really thorough and well done in terms of the policy. Then this document follows that, and we're hoping to follow that later in the year with the Climate Challenge document. Again, that'd be similar to the REBA one, but adjusted for the Irish context, to actually set the targets and set the metrics, I suppose, that we want to achieve in our industry in Ireland. In relation to the policy, I suppose it had 5 key elements, but the most important one from our point of view was this implementation idea. I think you can have lots of policies and lots of documents, lots of theory, but you need to actually help to implement that on the ground, and to support the members of the RAIA and wider construction professionals to actually make all of these changes that they need to make in their everyday practice. So we've set the bar, I suppose, in the policy about what we want to achieve, and then this guidance document is to support that actually being achieved. So it also includes a summary of the metrics that will be further expanded in the climate change document, because I think it's important to acknowledge that when we're talking about this stuff, not everyone is on the same page and actually understands the terms, the metrics, the numbers, the quantities, all the bits and pieces to it. So in this, we've just summarised what they are, what they're measured in, and why it's important actually to look at them. Then the remainder of the document is split into 6 main themes. We've introduced them in terms of how you would find them in the design process, assuming that the design process is linear, which I know it always isn't, but it's a familiar language and a familiar way to structure a problem to architects in terms of the work stages and when you might expect to find what parts. We've linked those to the metrics, and then we've given a concise summary, because part of this document is a very short document overall. I think it's about 20 pages. We wanted to be able to have something that was accessible. It does, in the light of all of the exhaustive information and all of the theory, that can be quite overwhelming to someone who's just starting out with this, and it kind of paralyzes them into doing nothing. So this is to bridge the gap between all of the information and actually starting to implement it in practice. So yeah, it goes through the different stages, and one we felt was really important to include was post-occupancy evaluation, because this is a very neglected thing in our context anyway. Everybody's very quick to move to the next project without learning the lessons and setting up that within the start of the project about how they're going to actually go back and look at how the building is performing, both from a qualitative point of view and from a quantitative point of view, so that we don't make the same mistakes in the next projects that we go on to. As I said, we've really tried to link this to the architect's design process, because I think as well, when you're talking about this as a new thing for people, that it should be very easy to kind of implement it in everyday practice without having to learn a whole new set of rules or a whole new set of way of working. So it works very well alongside what people are doing, but it adjusts the focus and the priority to these issues, and as I said, ties them to the different metrics, and really just, as was kickstarts someone thinking about them in that part of the process. Part of the guidance also contains this checklist tool, which is available in paper and in digital format. It goes into each of those 6 themes in greater detail. It's almost like a series of questions that you would ask yourself, like, have I done this? Have I looked at this? And can I say how well I've done it? It's not an environmental assessment method, purposely not. There's no scoring or matrix, because it's not about the evaluation of a final design. It's about kickstarting a design process. We could also see that this would be used as a good way to audit your own skills for CPD. So do I know about these areas well enough? Do I need to get extra training or attend some extra CPDs in these areas? And we also see it as being good at the very start of a project, at the briefing phase, particularly in interdisciplinary teams, where you can table this and actually use it as a discussion starter for what you mean for sustainability, what you define by it and what you mean by it, and so that everybody's working on the same page and working towards the same goals. And finally, we left the document with 10 steps that every architect or other industry professional could take from today, because I think often with these types of documents you read them and then you're not sure what to do next. So these are 10 simple steps. There's nothing very complicated in any of them. Basically, we're trying to kickstart the kind of huge industry cultural shift that is required, that the new mindset is required to put these things at the heart of our design process to get us to where we need to get to by 2030, which is not that long away, and beyond 2030, not just in terms of meeting targets or meeting metrics, but actually to engender a whole industry cultural mind shift change that needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That's a really good overview of the guidelines and framework, which is really important as part of the design process, of course. We're now moving back east, where I'm pleased to welcome Yuji Iwahashi from Japan. Yuji, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Architect Yuji Iwahashi is director of Nihon Seikei, and he studied architecture in Tokyo and urban design at Manchester University. He worked for Richard Rogers from 2006 to 2009 and gradually moved to so-called environmental architecture, especially on the combination of natural ventilation with solar direct gain. His project, the Yahoo Data Center, received several awards for its mode change scheme. Yuji is director of Nihon Seikei and has been a member of the Japan Institute of Architects since 2000 and also an RIBA member since 2012. He studied PhD in sustainable architecture at Tokyo Metropolitan University in 2020. I'm handing over to you now, Yuji.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to start today. So I'd like to introduce design methodology to reduce the use of air conditioning, but make even better built environment. The good example is a house, but originally the design method is for data center. So this can be applied to buildings of other use. So in the first place, the design methodology is to use the natural energy resource responding to the local climate. So there are a lot of passive design methods in the world as shown on the screen. So pinky colored ones are chosen for Far East climate like Japan. And the most effective way is to combine these 2 or 3 passive design methods into one package. So these are 5 combinations for Far East climate. So then to change these 5 according to day, night, and seasons. So this is the example of a house with openings and windows as indicated by blue for natural ventilation, and the skylight, which is covered by movable insulation panel. So using these 5 methods. So this is the house looking from south, and then so openings are for natural ventilation mainly and covered by eaves for rain, and windows are shadowed by eaves. So this is quite common in traditional house as well. So this is skylight, and it's good for natural lighting and gaining some radiation during daytime or winter, and discharging heat at night or summer. So however, it is not good during daytime or summer, and then cold night of winter. So I developed it needs to be covered by insulated panels. So together with all windows. So you see the insulation panels. And then another critical point is the natural ventilation will be maximized by the high ceiling, partially high ceiling, for kind of a buoyancy driven stack effect. It's like a chimney effect. And then another point is the shrinking and expanding the air volume of the house by movable walls or doors. So this is also the traditional way in Far East. So from this sheet, so items are summarized as mode. The idea of mode is used in data center for optimizing natural air intake. So this is a conservatory effect in winter daytime as mode 1, and the right-hand side is the mode 2 for the winter night. And the windows are covered by insulated panels as shown in red lines. So warm air is kept inside. And then mode 3, this is the daytime of spring, autumn. So natural ventilation is fully activated and the insulation panel of skylight is closed to cut the sun radiation. And the right-hand side is mode 4 at night. So in this case, skylight is used for discharging the heat to the sky or to the space even. And the next one is mode 5. This is for daytime of summer. So natural ventilation is used together with air conditioning. So natural ventilation used together with AHU it's called hybrid cooling. This is new. And then right-hand side is mode 6. It's at the point of hot midday. So all the openings are closed and using air conditioning fully. And this is probably the same configuration as ordinary houses. So just I show you the CFD study. So this image is ordinary air conditioning without natural ventilation. All the windows are closed, just using air conditioning. And the right-hand side is the CFD model of mode 5. Mode 5 means the hybrid cooling. So it's using natural ventilation together with air conditioning. So this is the kind of a situation of the convertible car, right? Using air conditioning on. So next sheet is the overall annual schedule of mode according to the temperature. So this is expected to be manually operated by people. So people are recommended to work for physical kind of exercise. So next slide is just for your reference as operation flow. So basically 3 categories: winter, spring, autumn, summer, and day and night. So 3 categories and day and night. So it's a kind of flow. And so this is the final slide. So this kind of same design cannot be applied to everywhere, but this design method will be applicable to other regions. So interestingly, this thought will let the design closer to the traditional indigenous design with a bit tweaking by modern technology. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yuji. And it's a really good way of looking at alternative solutions to something that we all face, which is heating and cooling. Thank you very much for that. We're now going to come back to the Europe, and I would like to welcome Amy Holt, Head of Sustainability PLP Architecture from the UK. Amy is a lead accredited professional and is a passionate advocate for environmentally responsible design across both the building and urban scales. She heads PLP Architecture Sustainability Design Group, which serves as a research think tank and collaborative body. It works with teams to develop project-specific sustainability strategies and helps to implement this across all the stages of a project. She is currently co-managing and leading the design team for 22 Bishopsgate, PLP's dynamic new tower in the City of London that creates an interactive vertical community for working and discovering. The project has been designed to achieve a BREEAM Excellent rating and was the first project in the City of London to register for the WELL certification. Amy received her Bachelor of Architecture from Auburn University and Master of Sustainable Environment Design from the AA. She's also has an ongoing relationship with the AA, serving as a guest critique for its MArch and MSc programs in Sustainable Architectural Design. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Amy, and I'm speaking to you from London. Now, you can go to the next slide. I don't claim to have the answer to today's topic. However, I do want to show you a snapshot of 3 commercial projects in London and the lessons that we've learned along the way, perhaps pointing to possible solutions. The first project is Page Street, which is a cut and carve retrofit in Westminster. In 1964, the original concrete frame building on the site served as a hospital. In 1998, it was refurbished and reclad in a style that very quickly became undesirable and left the building empty 10 years later. In 2011, we started the project as an internal refurbishment with Derwent London, but its future as part of the Burberry campus required more intensive interventions, including a full reclad, horizontally and vertical extensions to the massing. We built on the idea of a layered tartan and developing the details for the new facades. We retained the existing frame and hung a prefabricated strong back system, and that was then clad in handset brick. The new facades brought order to the varied floor-to-floor dimensions of the frame beyond. Each bay creating a calm and pleasant workspace with the ability to open the windows and let the outside in. The next project I want to tell you about is Cannon Street. This view is taken from the Golden Gallery of St. Paul's Cathedral, an extremely sensitive neighbor. In contrast to Page Street, the existing building's floor-to-floor levels weren't deemed adequate, and they compromised our ability to add additional floors under the viewing corridors of St. Paul's. The 70s office building was therefore demolished, and a new headquarters office building was inserted into the sensitive context. We approached unique orientational and environmentally responsive identities around the building, calm across from St. Paul's, playfully stepping back in plan to provide views between the Abbey and Rennes Cathedral, with deep stone profiles set into ordered frames to create a language for the building. We worked with Tom Stewart Smith to create pocket spaces at the roof for the occupants and at ground floor for the public park. For the next project, I'm going to jump up significantly in scale. This is 22 Bishopsgate in the heart of the City of London, a 62-story multi-tenanted office building we completed in November. A goal for the building was to create a vertical village inside of the tower, encouraging well-being through the provision of 100,000 square feet of amenity space. This includes an urban market at the base, co-working spaces for startups and small businesses, a gym, a retreat, and a club level above which there's a public viewing gallery and restaurant. All key program requirements diverging from a typical spec office building. The base is the civic face of the building. It serves as a more crafted and human scale juxtaposition to the glass and steel tower above. The glass and concrete canopies creating a cornice line for the building and deflecting downdrafts from the tower. To further humanize the building, we worked with artists both inside and out. Welsh glass artist Alexander Belashenko helped us create an art walk around the building, integrating pieces into the facades, canopies, and public realm. Internally, we worked with craftsmen including Pierre Renard, a French furniture maker, and Bill Amberg, a British leather craftsman, to create intimate spaces within the base of the tower. The lobby is open to the public and serves as an art gallery with changing exhibitions going on through the year. The building design and operation encourage a vehicle-free public realm, including high-quality active commuter facilities and the use of consolidation center outside of London to reduce the number of deliveries and vehicle trips to the building. Oh, there's a child behind me. Sorry, can you pause for a second? Just Miles, 1 second, please. 22 Bishopsgate reused all of the existing foundations and half of the existing 2-story basement. The combined capacity of the foundations for the previously abandoned tower and those of the original buildings on this, can you go back just 1 second, sorry, on the site helped to reduce the carbon emissions of the foundations by 70%. It's okay, you can go next. It's okay, yeah. At the heart of the building is 1.25 million square feet of flexible office space spread over 62 stories. Each floor plate allows for multiple tenants and flexible internal arrangements. Externally, we wanted the glazing to behave like a chameleon on the skyline. The lightly reflective facade changes throughout the day in response to light levels, viewing angle, and the surrounding environment, and morphs between being opaque, translucent, and fully transparent. The blinds within the facade skin have built-in step points depending on required solar shading, adding further visual dynamic and patina. The facade's an active closed cavity system with movable blinds connected to the BMS, which are dynamically operated based on the environmental conditions or the needs and wants of tenants. Resulting solar protection is 3 times better than a conventional facade, maximizing daylight and allowing the lights to be off more of the time. The 3-meter high floor to ceiling height steps up from 3.2 of the facade, bringing in more natural light and a blank canvas for creating exciting, healthy workspaces. So very quickly, that was 22. A quick overview of 3 very different projects with very different responses. And the big question is, what do we do next and how do we achieve it? In terms of environmental, all 3 of these projects push to reduce carbon and use through good design, but in retrospect, there are always areas for improvement. On Page Street, we designed an operable window in every workspace, only to find the building operators asked all occupants to close them. Next time, we need to do better at ensuring the mixed mode operation works as part of the holistic solution. Cannon Street stone frames allow the building to sit comfortably in its historic context. The stone is bonded to precast concrete, which is supported by the primary structure. All of these materials have inherent structural capacities that may not be working to their full potential. We need to work to find ways of building leaner and being more honest in our material choices and making them work harder. On 22, if the glass module, for example, had shifted from 1.5 to 3 meters across the tower, we could significantly reduce the piece count and embodied carbon of the facade. The building was fit out with Cat A ceilings and core finishes on office levels. Going forward, we can look at ways to not build interiors as speculatively, or again, just be a little bit leaner in our requirements and avoiding additional layers of material if they aren't needed. Now, as I said at the start, I did not promise to have the answers. I think events like this allow us to learn from each other on improving how and what we build, and I hope I gave you some food for thought, because I definitely gave myself some in preparing for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. And yes, you definitely have given us food for thought. And don't worry about your child. I've got a teenager in bed, which I hope have gone up and ready for school.
That was not
That is normal. That is part of part of life. It's great to see as well. Thanks, Amy. We're now going to go back to the Pacific. Well, actually, we go to the Pacific for the first time today, to New Zealand with our next speaker, Jeremy Smith, Design Director, Irving Smith Architects. Jeremy is Design Director of Irving Smith Architects, a research-based design practice working in sensitive environments throughout New Zealand and abroad. Recent accolades include a Special Judges Prize at the 2020 Taipei International Architecture Awards, 2019 UNESCO Award of Distinction at the Asia Pacific Cultural Heritage Awards in Penang, and World Villa of the Year at the 2017 World Architecture Festival in Berlin. ISA has received multiple NZIA New Zealand Architecture Awards in public and residential categories and twice won New Zealand's National Timber Design Award. Recent publications include Architecture Magazine, Architecture Record, Elle, Vogue and GQ Magazine. Jeremy is also an adjunct associate professor with a design-based PhD at the University of Auckland, writes for Architecture New Zealand and has lectured widely about the practice's work and research. In 2019 alone, he presented projects through 8 American universities at the New York League of Architects and in Paris and Amsterdam, before being an international judge and keynote speaker at the 2019 Indian Institute of Architects National Awards. Jeremy has judged the NZIA New Zealand Architecture Awards and at World Architecture Festivals in Singapore, Berlin and Amsterdam. and has recently been appointed an international advisor to the Savithi College of Architecture and Design in Chennai, India. Key to his practice, teaching and research is understanding how buildings inhabit an environment that constantly undergoes change, be it in city or rural landscape. Now, over to you, Jeremy.
Kia ora, Corey, kia ora. Welcome to New Zealand. And whare nui a Tuteata, a timber structure building that we've done with another New Zealand practice, RAIA Studio, which does a few things differently with timber and asks the community to come and walk on our forest. Now, way down here, we really are an island. If it's coming on a boat, it really is coming on a boat. We have limited concrete and limited steel. What we do have is a renewable source of plantation timber. And that's important as we look to embed carbon rather than release it. It's also important because we live on both sides of a plate boundary where the ground shifts at the same speed your fingernails grow. Heavyweight construction wasn't easy to hold on to in Napier in 1937, and it wasn't any easier in Christchurch in 2010, 2011. Now, we had made timber structural buildings. We'd even innovated low-cost damage avoidance design. But we were thinking in convention. We were thinking of timber buildings like steel and concrete buildings. We were making big, as the name mass timber suggests. So when the New Zealand government's Crown Research Institute invited us to do a new building at the entrance to their campus and to use more timber, please, our answer was to say, the answer in anything sustainable isn't using more of anything, it's using less. We should be making less mass timber structure buildings. So we went questioning, why do our timber buildings do 90-degree gymnastics at their junctions like steel and concrete buildings, when the strength of a tree follows the grain and is continuous? So we gave them a 3-story high timber structural diagrid where the load path is continuous through all timber engineered structural dovetail junctions by Dunning Thornton engineers. And we place a fuse between these prefabricated elements that can yield and be replaced after an earthquake. And we can make this with the tools that are in New Zealand. There's no boats required. And the size is extraordinary. So timber's usually the same size as a steel or concrete building, say 500 millimeters square. This building is 300 by 90, so less than a quarter the size. And of course, by being smaller, it's easier to resource, it's easier to transport, erect and construct and then change. So our building sits into the campus, but it lies outside the fence line. So it invites the community in on the ground floor with public space, and we have 2 floors of active science around a 3-story atria. And you can see just how small the timber is as the ventilating double skin facade and the solar fritting arrives, and our building slowly turns into a forest. So like a forest, the building reveals itself as you get closer to it. The closer you get, the more you see. And then internally, it behaves like a canopy. And the light condition in the building changes continually through the day. So if we spin round from inside this 3-story high atrium space during construction, you can see how the different bits legibly fit together. Which allows us to say to the community, Come walk inside our forest. Come see the future and come see what timber can contribute. So if you're a member of the public and you're kind of just wandering around in this building on the ground floor, you might be using some of the public space, you might be looking at one of the displays, you might be simply in the cafe, or whether you're upstairs and you're working in a collaborative open space, but you're part of the community and you're embedded into our part of the world. So you're part of a larger conversation about how we all work together to improve how we participate with the environment, what we call manakitanga. And of course, by being small, it means we can make more timber buildings rather than use more timber in individual timber buildings. The idea that if we're having less mass means that the process becomes iterative, and that the idea of being carbon better is more achievable. Now, this building, despite its small timber size, despite having a concrete perimeter foundation and having a curtain wall glazing system, is carbon neutral on day one. And remarkably, all the structural timber in this building is grown in New Zealand in the next 35 minutes. The next 35 minutes, all that timber regrows. Now that's sustainable, and that's a marker on New Zealand's journey to be carbon neutral by 2050. And it's already working. The building's already a little Insta famous. And this idea that you don't need to wait for technology or machines to come on a boat in order to think harder about how you use resources doesn't just apply to a small country like New Zealand a long way away. It applies to everyone. We are all in this together, and our message is that being small can help. Ka pai. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, and that's a really wonderful journey through a fabulous building. Thank you for sharing that with us. And last but certainly not least, I would like to welcome Menno Rubens from the Netherlands. Menno Rubens is a project developer and director of CPZ projects in Netherlands. He studied economics at the Erasmus University in Rotterdam and gained his degree as an architect and structural engineer from Delft University of Technology. Since '98, he has been an architect and project developer and director of CPZ projects, the development expertise of the Dutch Architectural Office CPZ in Delft. With his studio, he has been working intensively to radically apply the principle of circular design and construction in architecture. CPZ Projects breaks through the hit-and-run project development of the past decades and strives for a more flexible and adaptive building stock, conceptualized according to the building as product methodology, in which both sustainability and disassembly play an important role. The building as product introduces a concept of permanent temporality within the built environment. Recent projects developed by them and designed by CPZ architects include the temporary courthouse in Amsterdam, catering pavilion, the greenhouse in Utrecht, and building demountable on the site that also holds the office of the various CPZ expertise. Over to you, Menno.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. My name is Menno Rubens. I'm an architect and project developer at CPZ. I want to talk to you about developing future-proof architecture. How can we design and build future-proof buildings? CPZ is a multidisciplinary company. We are based in the historical city center of Delft in the Netherlands. Together with 100 colleagues, we develop, design and construct both commercial and residential projects. And we believe that architects can substantially contribute to a better future for our planet by following the United Nations definitions of sustainable development. meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet theirs. We can do that by embracing the impossibility of predicting the future. How can we make buildings that don't resist the inevitable changes that the future will bring? How can we create buildings that don't try to predict the future, but buildings that can accommodate changes and enrich themselves with age? You can do this by recognizing the different layers as defined by Stuart Brand, and then designing those different layers based on their life cycle. Shorter life cycle elements should extrinsically be adaptable, and longer life cycle elements intrinsically. To reduce the use of resources, we must move towards a circular economy. We must prevent parts of our project becoming waste. Maintain the value of your project by focusing on the higher circular priority levels, such as refuse, reduce, and reuse. I want to show you two recent future-proof projects that we have developed, designed, and built. The first is a demountable office building in Delft, and the second is a nature-inclusive housing project in Almere, both in the Netherlands. This demountable building is an extension of our own office in Delft. Although the building can be dismantled, it is not a temporary building. The building has a hybrid structure of steel and wood and has a transparent glass facade. All of our buildings are designed as kit of parts. This allows you to manufacture the building off-site and assemble it on-site. This method gives you better control over aspects such as time, quality, and construction costs. In the next image, you can see the three phases of the building process. The building consists of 4 floors that can be flexibly arranged. The entire structure was built in just a few weeks. This means minimal nuisance for the environment. And the entire building is assembled on site, and all connections between the various building elements are dry. So no welding or no concrete pouring is done on site. The building is a kit of parts that can be disassembled and reassembled multiple times. The result is a transparent building that can be used as an office building for 1 or more tenants, or can be transformed into apartments or laboratories. It is also possible to move the entire building to a different location. The building is designed, produced, and assembled as a product. This leads to a higher quality, a faster construction process, and to buildings that are higher adaptability potential, This building is ready for the unpredictable future. The next project I'd like to show you is our modular nature-inclusive building system that we developed for a range of low-density village estates. People who want to live close to nature and in a village setup are our target group for these estates. We've started to create a diverse community of potential residents of the village estates by organizing meetups. The community got to know each other, the housing concept, and the first location with 82 homes in Almere Oosterwold. We created a concept where the houses and the landscape coexist by carving out the existing landscape and sliding the curved longhouses under the landscape. So we have created a housing project that is also 100% landscape. By covering the houses with the landscape, we have combined different qualities in one concept. The houses are oriented in such a way that they absorb the heat of the spring and autumn sun. The covering also insulates the houses and protects them from the noise and shadows of the surrounding windmills. The project consists of 8 longhouses and a community house for the residents to work and recreate. And the longhouses are divided by the residents into 6 different sizes of homes, from small to extra large. The project was also developed as a kit of parts. All building elements are produced off-site and assembled on-site. This leads to the modular design where adjacent houses can be combined in the future and individual floor plans can be changed. Most of the installation is pre-installed in the prefabricated wooden structure of the skin and the roof. The proportions of the rooms give the residents a broad view of the surrounding landscape. Most of the surrounding landscape is owned by the entire community, but each residence has also its own private garden immediately adjacent to the glass facade. To keep out the heat of the sun in the summer, we have installed a canopy of PV panels on top of the glass facade. The access to the houses is located on the landscaped side of the longhouses. Some specific rooms have windows carved out of the rolling landscape. The organization of the longhouses ensures maximum privacy for all the residents. This is a recent aerial view of the project that we hope to complete in the 4th quarter of this year. This modular, nature-inclusive and flexible village estate is future-proof and ready to adapt to the needs of future residents. Today I showed you 2 of the many projects that we develop, design and build with the potential to adapt to an unpredictable future. We believe it's our duty as architects to design future-proof buildings to facilitate the transition to a global circular economy. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mano. That's really interesting, talking about demountable buildings. It really is probably some of the way or solutions that we'll be looking at as part solution, I should say. We're now going to move. I know we haven't got much time because of the delay we start, but I'm going to try. We've had quite a few questions come in, so I'm going to try and get through as many as possible. And I'm going to indulge myself by starting a question to all speakers. And I'm going to go one by one to you speakers, starting from Jen. And really is with regards to climate change and the role of Architecture Institute. With climate emergency and learnings from global pandemic, the profession must be able to adapt quickly to emerging issues. What do you think Architecture Institute can and must put in place to ensure this happens? Can I ask that question first to Jeanne?
I'm here. And for this question, in my opinion, I think it is necessary to keep a focus on the present and as well as the future, and also pay attention to the needs of the society. I think the most important thing is the social responsibility of the architects. Thank you. It's my opinion.
Okay, no, that's fine. No, that's fantastic, Jan. Same question to Kwan Ju, please.
Hi, I think we have to divide the type of space into reusable space and kind of specified space for a certain purpose to reuse the building itself, because globally they're tending to demolish all the buildings so much, and they kind of try to apply new technology for a new building. So that's one of my opinion, and people have to start to not treating all the building with indoor space and outdoor space. There has to be kind of space in between indoor, outdoor, not fully controlled, is part of the nature, is part of our boundary. And yeah, that's kind of the beginning of what we and what architecture can contribute to the change. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwan Ju. Sarah, your opinion on Architecture Institute's role?
Hi, I think an important part of the question is this idea of responding quickly. I think sometimes institutes may be too slow to respond to the issues of the time because they're caught up with maybe policy or bureaucracy or something. So I think it's really important to be able to flex and move more quickly and respond to things just in a much more interactive and flexible way.
Thank you, Sarah. And Yuji, your thoughts from Japan?
Mm-hmm. So collectively as architects need to announce something to the public, and unfortunately in Japan the role of architects are a bit limited to work inside the architectural world rather than publishing something to the society. So regarding the case of Japan, probably we need to publish something to the public rather than internal architectural world. Maybe the same in the other countries. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Amy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's been a shift change post-pandemic, and we've been forced to go remote. And for all its downsides and children showing up in meetings and presentations, we're connecting with each other, we're attending more seminars, and we're discussing more things. And I think institutes have the responsibility and actually an opportunity to continue that discussion and to continue helping educate, because I think my answer for many things will be we need to just continue educate and we need to continue learning, because all of us still have things to learn, and as does the world, on how to start dealing with it. So we just all need to not be complacent and return to our offices and our chairs and our meeting schedules and not making the time for these things. And you need to provide us the opportunity to attend them.
No, that's a fair point. Thank you, Amy. Jeremy.
Well, there's no fixed answer. So it's not the right question to say, how's the Institute going to help us? We have to do this. So the answer's not in the Institute telling you, the answer's in asking the question. And the process is going to be iterative, and it's going to happen in little small steps. And ultimately you just have to get in and do it. That's how we're going to get there. So the Institute's going to support that, but we as architects, as people who and as people who live in cities and who make buildings, and you just have to get in and do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, Jeremy. And Menno.
Yes, I agree with Jeremy. I think the Architectural Institute should accommodate the crossover with other disciplines within the building industry, but also outside of the building industry. Focus on the knowledge development and that's also has to do with the educational aspects of it, and especially be open to maybe a changing role of the architect, a changing definition of what an architect is, and that we might have to go back a few hundred years to what architects did then, and analyze what over the last 20, 30 years architects have lost in their role, and maybe try to take that back.
No, that's fantastic, Menno. Yeah, I totally hear you. Next question is initially to Jan and Quan Ju. You both, and actually Jeremy, you've done the same thing. You both eloquently talk about the relationship between people and spaces. What do you think architects need to do to better engage the end user of a sustainable building? Jan, do you want to start?
Okay, I think first of all, to establish a common goal with the users is important. And then we should see the needs of the users and integrate the needs with sustainable goals. And finally, to work with the users to find practical solutions. That's what I thought.
Thank you, Jan. Quan Ju.
Yeah, I'm here. Apart from sustainability, we architects normally, my opinion is we normally dream for the client, because normally they don't know what they want. So we help them to draw the actual need of the space. But when we move to sustainability, the first thing we have to do is to educate the client not to be so greedy, because they always need the efficiency and the functionality. But once they, or include me, once we actually give up some part of the conveniency, it's better. It's going to be better work. We have to be uncomfortable. That's what I tell them.
Okay, no, that's that. Thank you for that. Thank you, Quan Ju. Thank you, Jan. I'm going to ask a question. That's a question for Sarah, and it's about framework and guidelines. Sarah, it says that it is of course important for the profession, but how do we ensure it is followed by the majority in the profession? Because without this, how effective would outcomes be? Just a fair question.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's why I suppose I hinted at the idea that you can keep producing policies and guidelines and frameworks and everything, but it's the implementation bit that is key. I would say, I suppose, two things. One is you need to, I suppose, lead from the front and say, this is what we are requiring architects to do, like as a professional body. And also perhaps we're also looking at maybe making elements of that CPD, mandatory. That's something we're also looking at. But in a way, and it goes back to what Jeremy said, in a way, I mean, if you're not doing it, where are you? What are you doing? Like, you can lead a horse to water. I mean, this is the issue of our time, I think, as architects. And if you're not looking at it, even in a small way, then you're just so far behind. There's only so much we can do to convince people that this is an important thing to be at and to be doing. We can provide the supports, provide the guidelines, and I think that as well in the pathways document is why we made it as accessible and easy as possible. Left 10 things, very easy, practical things you can do straight away. You don't need any extra knowledge to do them. Just to try and make that first step as easy as possible. But in a way, after that, I mean, short of just shouting at people to get their act together, just make small steps. That's all I can suggest. And try not to get jaded. I think for any of us who've been working in this for a while, not to get too jaded with the amount of change required, but to keep making small step changes.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to quickly ask the next question for Yuji, in which it says, how do we encourage clients to accept alternative solutions as part of design concept like you've described?
Yeah, as Kwanju said, I think the comfortability will be the point, because at the beginning we tried to achieve the saving energy kind of strategy, but actually if it's not comfortable, people can't follow that way. And then, so example is the natural ventilation with air conditioning. You can use these two at the same time. So if you can experience this kind of a bit weird combination. If you ride on the compatible car and in the summer and using air conditioning, it's fantastic, but it's maybe the waste of energy. But regarding in the case of the house, it can be proved as energy saving, and you feel that's very comfortable. You can enjoy that environment, right?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think we now are going to Jeremy. A question for you, Jeremy. Wonderful project here. Timber, though, is often touted as sustainable material, but it is not finite. How do we justify using it long term?
Well, you've all been to places where there's old buildings with timber in them, but you're asking the wrong question. Why do you want your buildings to stay the same for so long? Why are we building castles? That's a better answer. The world's changing. We should be trying to change our buildings to suit what's coming.
Okay, that's yep. I agree with that. It's a very, very fair point from you. And I think, Jeremy, you could stay. The next question is for you and Mano, and it is about modular. And Jeremy and Mano, do you think that all buildings could become modular with interchangeable components? We'll start with you, Jeremy.
Okay. Well, look, I think the way to think of it is we've been taught that we should repeatedly finish the landscape and not change our buildings because we thought we could control the environment. Well, clearly we can't. So if we should be repeatedly finishing our buildings so we don't have to change the environment. We can't control it. We've got to let that change, then you have to change with it. So you can't sit there. I mean, it might be easy to say in a young part of the world like we are way down here, but you can't sit there thinking, I'm going to build a building that's going to stay the same for 20 years. I think the world's changing, and you need to think, how does my building change, and what do I need to arm it with or gear it up with to allow that to happen? Where does it look for prompts to change? And so does that mean it becomes modular? That's one approach.
Thank you, Jeremy. Manu?
Yeah, to strive for the ultimate modular system, I don't think that's very useful. It's tried before and was never successful. What you could do on different scales, it might be successful, but on the scale of an entire structure of a building, I don't think that's very useful. I agree totally with Jeremy that you should make your building possible to adapt to future developments. It should be able to age, to gain functionality, to gain likability over time, and not like most of the buildings lose all those qualities after the first day that they're built. I often refer to Stuart Brand's book, How Buildings Learn. And there you see beautiful examples of buildings that age and gain quality over time, and people start loving it, people start caring for it, people start changing it, adding things to it, taking things away from it, and then buildings become really part of the environment and likable objects that develop throughout the developments of the society around it.
Thank you, Manu. Yes, yeah, I think that makes total sense, and I really must get that book that you mentioned. There are lots and lots of questions come in, but we can't get to all of them, I'm afraid, because we're running out of time, and I'm conscious it's the start of a work day for many in Europe, and actually the end of the day for those further out east, so I don't want to hold anyone back. We will come back to you, audience, with specific questions where appropriate. I want to end with a final question for all our speakers. What is the one thing we need to introduce or change in light of climate emergency? We're going to start with Jan.
Okay, if there is one thing, I think is lifestyle. That's what I think.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Kwon Ju.
Similar to what I mentioned before, in other expression, we have to change our attitude. I think that's the most important part, that once we occupy the space, especially indoor space, we have to change our mind that we are the area we are occupying. So it's better to just shrink down the space. We must control the climate, and we must control the environment. That's I think the beginning of the change.
Thank you, Kwon Ju. Sarah.
Hi, I think there's two things I would focus on. One is what I referenced earlier in terms of post-occupancy evaluation, and not just moving on from project to project to project, but to actually evaluate lessons we learn in each project we do so that we don't repeat mistakes. And the second would be to rethink and reframe what an architect does. That I think still in education, we're producing graduates that think that you're building something new and leaving a legacy and changing space in that way. But actually, maybe it's about not doing that. It's more about problem solving and systems thinking. And when a client comes to you with a problem that is a design problem, that you rethink that instead of always the solution being let's build something, and also to look back at and reuse all of the existing fabric of the buildings we have before we build something new. I think at the minute we're like building something new is what architects do, and that should just be eradicated from our mindset, or be the last thing we think of doing.
I think we can learn at the indigenous building in each region, because traditionally the buildings are built without the fossil fuels. So I think there must be a lot of hint in those buildings, and then adapting to the current design and current technology. Yes.
Thank you, Yuji. Amy?
Yeah, I think we need to, kind of touching on, underlining what everybody else has said, but I think we need to proactively adapt. I think we can't just adapt as things come to us and the regulations change. We need to really push and say we need to be doing more than box ticking. We need to respond to the challenges that we have. I know there's a question out there about whether or not we should be building towers like 22 going forward, but I'm not advocating that. I think the point, what I was trying to present was what Sarah said is we need to learn from the lessons that we've done. We need to do better than we have been doing, and we need to respond to the challenges that are set now, but the ones that are there in the future. So 22 responded to challenges at the time that it was come forth, and it pushes the boundary where it does. But no, I think we need to also be looking at the reuse. We need to be doing more with the existing stock. And if we can't make use of the existing stock, what best can we do instead of that? So, yeah.
Thank you, Amy. Jeremy?
I quite often get asked this question when I talk at places, and I kind of say that the next generations down, they've already started. They've already asking the question, how do we solve this? And so I actually think for most of us up in the architectural world who are actually making things, we need to keep up. And I think we need to keep asking how, because that's how we're going to get there.
That's a good point there, Jeremy. And finally, Menno.
Yeah, I think that the idea of circular and sustainable building, although we are all thinking that we're doing something new, is actually a very old concept, and that we have to acknowledge that we've drifted away of making buildings, or making our surroundings intrinsically circular or sustainable, and we lost that somewhere over the last 100 years, I guess, with the introduction of the planned obsolescence idea that we also not only put on products but also on buildings. So I think we can learn a lot for the future by looking at the past and yeah, sometimes going one step back to go 3 steps ahead.
Thank you, Menno, and thank you, all speakers. It's really been truly a pleasure to be chairing today's very inspiring session. I've learned a lot. I'm not an architect, but I've learned so much from all of you. And very interesting projects and ideas. Thank you again to all of you for today's event. Jen Jiao of Beijing Institute of Architecture Design in China, Gwangju Park, TAD Corporation and TA Architects, Republic of Korea, Sarah O'Dwyer, Chair of the RAIA Sustainability Task Force Ireland, Yuji Iwahashi, Nihon Seikei, Japan, Amy Holtz, PLP Architecture UK, Jeremy Smith, Irving Smith Architects New Zealand, and Menno Rubens, CBZ Projects Netherlands. I also like to thank the American Institute of Architects, the Australian Institute of Architects, the Architectural Society of China, the Royal Institute of Dutch Architects, the Council of Architecture and Urbanism in Brazil, the Japan Institute of Architects, the Korean Institute of Architects, the New Zealand Institute of Architects, and the Royal Institute of Architects of Ireland for their support and contribution. It has been a true pleasure to be working and collaborating with all these institutes. Without their support, we would not be here today, so huge thanks to everyone. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining and contributing with such interesting questions. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I have, and please do follow @RAIA Global to keep abreast of upcoming international activities. For those in China, we also have a WeChat account. For now, a huge thanks again to all our speakers and to today's worldwide audience for watching. I wish you all a very good evening and day wherever you are in the world. Until next time, do take care and stay safe. Thank you.